Okay, hi, I'm Brian Hanchy with AST Suspension, and this is a new demonstration that we're doing, presentation for kind of a carry-on to the video that we showed demonstrating the shock dyno and how we use the shock dyno every day with AST shocks. So we're calling this Shock Dyno 102. Again, we're trying to keep these brief. This is not supposed to be a demonstration or presentation that tells you everything there is to know about shocks or about dyno plots, because that would be, a multi-day presentation. So we're doing these in little chunks, and we just want to demonstrate some of the information that's out there, and some of the good and some of the bad information that you typically see. So the first slide that we have here, shock dyno plot basics. We're just going to talk about some of the very basic ideas behind a shock dyno plot and what you should look for when you're purchasing shocks. So some of the basics that you see here, usually, the shock dyno plot is there to demonstrate a force versus velocity plot of the shock. So as the shock accelerates and the speed increases, either in rebound or compression, we want to see how much force is generated in that direction. Of course, we want to see, you'll typically hear the terms compression and rebound. Also, you'll hear bump and extension. Those are synonymous with the ones listed there, so you can use those terms interchangeably, but most of the time across the globe people talk about compression and rebound. Of course, dyno plots are great marketing tools for selling shocks. I've seen some really interesting ones out there from other manufacturers, some copied out of books even, not actually measured on a shock dyno. I mean, maybe they were measured on a shock dyno at some point, but they've copied them out of books, and they tell you what they want you to see with their shock. So just because you see a dyno plot does not necessarily mean that that's really what the shock is doing on the car. Now, of course, dyno plots are great tools. Professionals will always use dyno plots in racing to compare shocks, either to make sure that both front shocks are identical and both rear shocks are identical, and for testing. And of course, you want to look at it because sometimes the dyno plot will tell you when things aren't working or when they are working correctly. So you want to look for things like, is the adjuster adjusting at each click as you make a change, or things like perhaps there's a leak in the shock and you want to see if that shows up on the dyno plot. If you really, always like to say, when you take a shock, when you think about it in its simplest terms, we're really just talking about fluid moving from one side of a piston to another. So and controlling how quickly it moves and how much force is generated by the shock. So if we move on here, I don't have a diagram for this, but if you look at the bottom of this slide, not to jump around too much, but rorigengineering.com has some great technical information. There's a technical article section. You can use this link, or you can just go to their website and find their technical info section, and there's a lot of really good reading about shock dynos and what you're looking at. And this is some of the very basics behind one of the articles that they have on there. So if you think about shock dyno plot, and we talked about this in our Shock 101 video, but if you think about a dyno plot, it actually has 4 quadrants. So, four sections of the dyno plot. The shock accelerates in compression. The shim stack, in the case of a shock that uses shims, opens. And then the shock has to decelerate because it has to stop, turn around, and go the opposite direction. So it decelerates, and you want to see what the shims are doing as it decelerates. And then, of course, shock, as it turns around, it accelerates and rebound and decelerates and rebound. So again, those are really 4 things that you look at. Now, most of the time when you look at a dyno plot, you're only seeing 2 lines, and we'll talk about why that is and what people are showing with that. Some of the types of plots now, there's many things you can do with a shock dyno. You can look at the instantaneous plot as it is going through its stroke, and you can compare a lot of different things to it. But the ones that I typically see when we have a customer come to us and say, I want a shock that matches this dyno plot, usually what they will bring us is one of these first two. So compression open, rebound close, and again, as the name implies, that's as the shock starts to accelerate in compression and as it is closing in rebound. So technically it's really going the opposite direction. It's as a rebound is decelerating and the compression accelerates, and then rebound open, compression close, which is just the opposite. And then one that gives you a lot more data than that, and we'll discuss these, is a CVP plot, or a constant velocity plot. So we'll talk about that in a minute, as well as a PVP plot, peak velocity plot, that actually, we'll talk about this more, but it actually gives you more information than any of the other ones. So a lot of times what we'll see is somebody bring a compression open, rebound close, and again, that only tells half the story. So we'll talk a little bit about each one of these as we go through.